One Piece has no shortage of incredible characters with extremely unusual anatomies. In fact, the primary power system of the show, the Devil Fruits, operate by starkly toying with the anatomy of a user. On top of that, you have different races within the storyline and the world building, with each race being unique anatomically. And finally, many characters are no strangers to external changes, with the cyborg transformation being quite popular among the characters. In fact, two of the Strawhats, namely Franky and Sanji, are cyborgs to an extent. But there's one character who ticks every single box as a Devil Fruit user, as a being from a special race, and as a cyborg. And that is Bartholomew Kuma, the star of today's video, whose anatomy we're going to take a deep dive into. Kuma as a Buccaneer. Bartholomew Kuma was born to a human mother and a Buccaneer father. The Buccaneers are a nearly extinct race similar to the members of the Lunarian race such as King and the three-eyed tribes such as Pudding. At present, Kuma is the only confirmed living being who possesses Buccaneer blood. Those belonging to this race are massive in size and are said to carry the blood of the giants, although they're not as big as the giants themselves. Kuma's father, Clap, was a full-blooded Buccaneer, and despite having a human mother, Kuma took after his father when it came to stature, as he was big and incredibly strong even when he was a kid. He also always possessed an extremely durable body like the others of his race, which was one of the many reasons as to why the world nobles had historically used the Buccaneers as slaves. Having gone through severe physical abuse as a slave and also in the hands of bullies since a very tender age, Kuma only persevered due to his special heritage. At some point, he acquired the Paw-Paw Fruit, with one of the fruit's abilities being the power to remove a person's physical pain and condense it within a paw bubble. Kuma would often use this ability on the elderly of his hometown, taking away their pain and using his powers every weekend. To prevent the pain from returning to them, he would, in secrecy, absorb the pain and sickness into his own body and had to be nursed back to health by Ginny. It was a painful and tiring ordeal, even for someone as strong as Kuma, but he wouldn't have been able to take on the physical pain of so many people in the first place had it not been for his Buccaneer heritage. His body, combined with his devil fruit, allowed him to become powerful enough to solo his opposition, which was often the royal army of a tyrannical ruler named Bekori, as he wanted to protect his hometown of Sorbet Kingdom against his segregational policies. Eventually, he met the genius scientist Dr. Vegapunk in New World's Egghead Island, who had been working on a cloning project. Seeing Kuma's stature, Vegapunk knew that he had to examine his body, and since Kuma wanted Vegapunk to cure his daughter Bonnie's rare disease, that is, the sapphire scales, he offered the scientist to experiment on his body. Kuma being a Buccaneer was a problem, however, as the race had historically been hunted by the world nobles, not just for their physique, but probably due to the warrior of liberation Nika being a highly mentioned god in Buccaneer folklore, stories of whom were passed down from one generation to the next. With knowledge of Vegapunk and Kuma's partnership and Bonnie's involvement, one of the five elders, J. Garcia Saturn, used the situation to his advantage. He had Vegapunk turn Kuma into a cyborg, as Kuma's Buccaneer body would make him the perfect candidate for such a procedure and allow the world government to have a powerful weapon of war. To know more about why and how Kuma became a cyborg and agreed to have his body altered to such a great extent, check out our video on the life of Kuma. Physical strength aside, Kuma also possessed Haki, a skill he probably learned while part of Monkey D. Dragon's revolutionary army. We haven't seen enough of Kuma using Haki, but he did launch a powerful armament Haki attack in the Egghead arc while protecting Bonnie against Saturn. Despite Saturn being extremely powerful as an elder and in his yokai form, Kuma's Haki-coated punch sent him flying and made Saturn crash through several buildings. Kuma's Paw-Paw Fruit. The Nikyu no Mi, known as the Paw-Paw Fruit in English, is a paramecia-type devil fruit. It alters the appearance of the user's palm by permanently manifesting a paw on it. Despite its cute and funny name, its abilities are quite powerful and effective. For this reason, it was one of the fruits alongside Kaido's fish fruit model Azure Dragon that was supposed to be offered in God's Valley to the winner of the hunting contest. One of the primary abilities that the Paw-Paw Fruit grants the user is that of being able to repel anything. The user doesn't physically need to use any force to perform this, and all that's required for this repulsion to take place is the object coming into contact with the paw of the user, following which they are repelled with immense force and speed, although the impact of this can vary. In Kuma's case, he is often seen wearing a pair of gloves, probably because it would make touching things complicated if everything came into contact with his paws. The name of the fruit is symbolically intentional, in the sense that while Luffy, to an extent, is modeled after a monkey, Kuma's character takes inspiration from bears. For example, the word Kuma literally translates to bear in Japanese. His enormous size, silent demeanor, and the paws on his palms add to this symbolism. However, Kuma's paws are only present on his palms and not on his feet. The fruit as an offensive and defensive weapon. The repulsive ability of the Paw-Paw Fruit can have various versatile uses, so let's go over them. For starters, Kuma can repel anything, irrespective of matter and whether it's tangible or not. For example, he can obviously repel solid objects such as people or even himself, but the ability can extend to immaterial beings such as ghosts, as well as intangible targets such as air. This allows the user of the fruit to have access to impeccable defense, as the ability to repel intangible objects allows the user to deflect any attack or send it back to the attacker. The best part is the paws don't take any damage from doing so, making the Paw-Paw Fruit a paramecia type that can hard counter the abilities granted by Logia fruits. Up until the introduction of Haki, characters have visibly struggled against Logias, but as long as a user has the Paw-Paw Fruit, they won't experience this problem. Because the paws can repel material objects, Kuma can also go against sword users and gain the upper hand over opponents who use cutting techniques. However, its major weakness lies in the concentration of power being limited, as his paws are the only part of his body that can utilize this power. Should the user's arms get incapacitated in any way, they might not be able to use these powers anymore. This isn't very applicable with respect to Kuma, who is physically very powerful due to his Buccaneer heritage and cyborg body, but this same devil fruit can be possessed by several people over a period of time, with the deaths of its former users, so if a user of this fruit doesn't have physical abilities similar to Kuma's, it can be much easier to incapacitate them and avoid the effect of their paws. Due to the fruit's ability to repel air and gas, Kuma can push away the atmosphere that surrounds him at light speed to generate paw-shaped shockwaves. These shockwaves can pierce through almost anything and achieve results for which he would have needed someone akin to a swordsman in his crew. And narratively, at least as a pirate, Kuma has operated alone, much like Mihawk. Due to the versatility of his repulsive abilities, he was able to carry out several tasks at once without needing other members in his crew. In Thriller Bark, Kuma also showed off the ability to create paw bubbles to surround the air, which he then compressed down and activated to achieve the results of an enormous explosion. To understand the defensive and offensive abilities of the Paw-Paw Fruit better, let's go over some of Kuma's named attacks. Firstly, we have Pad Cannon, which Kuma uses to repel the air around him at the speed of light. This is what creates a ginormous shockwave as he activates the paw bubble he created to contain air and launches it towards his target at a high speed. This shockwave has the ability to travel through the target's body and leave paw prints in its wake on the floor or the concrete. Anything that lies in the path of the attack's target receives serious damage. As such, despite being an effective attack on offense, it's not very nimble and can only be used in open spaces where the user can cause an unprecedented blast. Next up, there's the Thrust Pad Cannon, to which Kuma plants his feet firmly on the ground and stomps like a sumo wrestler. He then launches his palms forward several times in a manner similar to Luffy's Gatling attacks. With each shot of his palm, a pressure shot is ejected out of his paws and towards his opponent. Long story short, it's a thrusting, open-handed strike. Thirdly, we have Squish, a standard defensive ability that allows Kuma to use his hands to intercept any attack launched towards him and then repel it. He used it to repel Zoro's 36-pound Phoenix attack, as well as his sword blades. And finally, we have Kuma's most notable attack, the Ursus Shock, also known as the Ursa Shock in some of the dubs. The name takes inspiration from the constellation of the Great Bear, Ursa Major, once again tying the symbolism of Kuma back to bears. With Ursus also meaning bear in Latin, Ursus Shock literally translates to bear impact and is the strongest out of all of Kuma's explosive attacks. The attack operates as Kuma forms a huge paw bubble by outstretching his arms. A generous amount of air is trapped within the bubble, which he then begins to repel with his paws over and over to compress and condense the bubble. The bubble shrinks quickly and at some point becomes small enough to fit into Kuma's hands. After this, Kuma launches the compressed bubble towards his opposition. As the bubble reaches its target and is away from the influence of Kuma's paws and its compression, it begins to decompress. This causes a massive paw-shaped explosion, allowing the ability to operate like a bomb. When used by Kuma in Thriller Bark, it uprooted trees, destroyed buildings, and took out a significant portion of the enormous ship. This attack was once again used by Kuma in Marineford against Little Oars Jr., who was trying to free Ace. It was able to critically injure the ancient giant and shatter its blade. The drawback to this attack, however, is the amount of time required to generate it, which can leave Kuma vulnerable for a period, especially because he uses both of his hands to create the attack. However, as a Buccaneer and a pacifista, his body is strong enough to withstand external attacks without having to respond to them. Abstract usage of the Paw-Paw Fruit, the transfer of pain and memories. Kuma also has the ability to repel abstract targets such as memories, physical pain, fatigue, and sickness. Instead of blowing them away, however, Kuma draws out a person's physical issues by repelling them with his paws as they're pushed out while encased in a paw-shaped bubble. The size of the bubble changes with respect to the amount of pain or sickness he is pushing out. While he does that, his target is absolved of their physical problems. He used this technique a lot throughout his life to cure the old people of his hometown, and most notably, to take away Luffy's physical pain after fighting Moria in Thriller Bark as Nightmare Luffy. However, the paw bubble containing the pain of the people has to eventually be taken on by someone else. Failure to do so would cause the pain to return to whoever it had been pushed out of. While Luffy's pain was passed on to Zoro, the old people from Kuma's hometown of Sorbet continued to remain oblivious to Kuma himself taking on their pain every weekend and suffering as a result due to his self-sacrificial nature. The person accepting the pain could be anyone, regardless of Kuma's influence. In the case of Luffy and Zoro, he passed Luffy's pain bubble to Zoro, who then put his hands inside it to take on his captain's pain. Kuma can also control the amount of pain he's passing from one to another, as seen from when he made Zoro experience a small portion of Luffy's pain by slicing a small bubble out of Luffy's pain paw bubble. Hypothetically, Kuma can push out a person's pain and fatigue, and anyone else could randomly come and take on that very pain by putting their hands into the condensed bubble. When it comes to pain bubbles, however, they seem to be red in color. On the other hand, we have the memory bubble, orange in color and more opaque than the pain bubble. Unlike the latter, a memory bubble doesn't have to be passed down from one person to another and can be stored for years in a singular place. Of course, it has to remain untouched and protected, just like Kuma's memory bubble that Vegapunk was housing safely in his lab in Egghead Island. The memories within the bubble can be duplicated, which would allow one to acquire and pass on the memories pushed out by Kuma without exhausting the bubble and losing access to it. The one that Vegapunk had access to was Kuma's life memories. The person to experience the memories within the bubble by touching it was his adoptive daughter Bonnie, following which the bubble ceased to exist. Unusual method of transportation, the ability Kuma is famous for. The PawPaw Fruit's most notable ability, however, is its ability to send things flying, including the user. When Kuma meets Perona in Thriller Bark, he asks her where she'd like to take a vacation, after which he sends her to Gloom Island where Mihawk lives. He does so by touching her with his paws and she disappears with a pop. On paper, it looks like she vanished, however, the paws just repelled her very, very fast, causing her to look like she disappeared. He uses this ability on the Strawhats and Sabaody to send them to faraway places. While they all disappear with a pop, we later see them floating through the skies enclosed in bubbles as they all land in different locations. Kuma can use this ability to effectively send anyone to his destination of choice, but it has to be a place he's visited before. Adding on to that, he can get to places quickly by using this ability on himself, allowing him to have access to a mode of transport that's way faster than ships and doesn't require having to sail through the treacherous waters of the Grand Line. This is how he traveled to and fro battlefields during his time as a revolutionary, and hopping from place to place to search for a cure to Bonnie's disease allowed him to learn about several unique places across the globe. Another issue with this ability would be its altitude. There's been an instance where Kuma himself crashed against the Red Line, which is located higher than any other island in the world. Having crashed at the high speed of the transportation bubble, Kuma also received heavy damage and had to climb up the Red Continent to get back on track. The PawPaw Fruit's ability to send things flying was first used by Kuma in God Valley after he stole the fruit with help from Ivankov and Ginny and saved 500 people from the hunting contest. He was able to lead so many people to their freedom, Ivankov dubbed Kuma's paws as the Hand of Liberation. Kuma as a cyborg, the pacifist turned pacifista. Kuma is probably one of the most effectively made and powerful modern-day cyborgs in the One Piece universe, both due to the fact that he's a Buccaneer as well as his transformation having been done by the genius Vegapunk. During the time of his introduction across Thriller Bark and the Summit War saga, he was the best we had seen, but now, with Sanji being something of a cyborg himself and having unbelievable durability, Kuma is not the only top dog in the game. Kuma's transformation was done over the course of 2 years, where his body was slowly and steadily made to become electronic, with his organic and inorganic components coexisting within his body. During the last phase of his transformation, he was brainwashed, with his mind and free will being erased as the government wished to use the Kuma cyborg, also known as the pacifista, as a weapon of war who offered absolute obedience. How durable is Kuma? The transformation allows Kuma to possess insane levels of durability and physical strength to the point that he can intercept several attacks by the Marines, both explosive and cutting, be it attacks caused by technology, hockey, or devil fruits. The metal used to upgrade him is said to be far stronger than steel, notably proven by Zoro's attack on a partially transformed Kuma only creating a slight gash when he had acquired the ability to cut through steel following his fight against Mr. One in Arabasta. Attacks launched using metal weapons often shattered into pieces on coming into contact with Kuma's body, and, in the best case scenario, for Kuma's opponent that is, it just failed to penetrate his shell. Unlike normal metal, however, the one used for Kuma is non-magnetic, proven by him being unaffected by Eustace Kid's magnet powers. Sanji, who always possessed a very durable body due to his lineage as a Vinsmoke, took some damage after kicking Kuma with his flaming Diable Jambe in Thriller Bark, and went on to state that if he had kicked harder, his leg would have snapped in two. Of course, this took place a long time before the awakening of Sanjay's Germa genes. Diable Jambe not having an effect on Kuma also showed off the pacifista's resistance to fire. However, its electronic nature might make it vulnerable to lightning attacks. Ivankov's Galaxy Wink was able to land some substantial damage on the pacifista. By the time we see Kuma in Egghead, it's evident the pacifista has been made to withstand several attacks over the course of 2 years, be it from the government's opposition, the celestial dragons who tortured him while having rented him during Reverie, or by the Marines during the time he tried to climb the Red Line and after he reached Egghead. However, the pacifista continued to remain functional, showing off just how resilient it is. Kuma was also supposed to have a self-destruct switch in case the main body went berserk and stopped being obedient to the world government. Of course, Saturn had asked for this modification so that if Kuma were to betray them, they could make the pacifista explode. However, Vegapunk secretly ensured that the self-destruct button only shut Kuma down instead of causing an explosion, which is what happened after he was rescued by the Revolutionary Army from the Reverie. Saturn tried to make the pacifista explode by activating the switch, but Kuma shut down. Interestingly, it began to operate on its own and rushed to the Red Line using the Paw-Paw Fruit's ability, after which Kuma began to climb the continent. He used the fruit again to come to Egghead, where he was more than functional, despite the fact that he shouldn't have been moving. Cloning process. The Kuma pacifista had been cloned to create an army of such cyborg soldiers. In fact, Vegapunk's main motive after meeting Kuma was to use him and study his anatomy for his cloning project. Later, Saturn's cruel bargains led to Vegapunk having to transform Kuma into a mindless weapon, which Kuma himself agreed upon as the Elder used Bonnie's treatment as a bargain. Unlike their main body, however, the clones don't possess the abilities of the Paw-Paw Fruit. The Kuma Seraphim, however, S-Bear, created using green blood and more advanced technology, can mimic the abilities of the Paw-Paw Fruit. Similar instances would be Hancock's S-Snake having the powers of the Love Fruit. Special features added to the pacifistas: electronic scopes and laser beams. Every Kuma pacifista has a built-in electronic scope in its pupils which can be used to identify wanted pirates across a sizable distance. Within a few seconds, the models can analyze the name and bounty of the pirate and launch attacks. It can also identify a target through smoke or through any disguise. If it scans an ally, however, the pacifista models will cease the attack. Boa Hancock used this to her advantage in Marineford to protect Luffy as she shielded him from the pacifistas, and with the electronic scope analyzing her as an ally due to her warlord status, they shut down the attacks. On the other hand, if a wanted pirate goes through a great deal of age alteration, the pacifista will not be able to identify them. To top that off, the Kuma pacifista has been amped up using augmented hearing, allowing him to pick up any sound across a larger than normal distance. While Vegapunk worked on Kuma's transformation, Kizaru was present throughout the procedure. The Admiral possesses the Glint Glint Logia Devil Fruit, which allows him to literally turn into light, shoot laser beams, and move at the speed of light. Vegapunk took inspiration from Kizaru's moveset and fitted a laser beam within the pacifista's mouth and hands, which then became its primary offensive moveset. For the original Kuma body, however, the hand lasers are shot from gloves that cover his devil fruit manifested paws. The laser beams have incredible piercing power, strong enough to pierce through the hides of those who use ancient zone-type devil fruits. These beams can also cause huge explosions, damaging the pacifista's targets and their surrounding environments. However, one of the pacifista models, namely PX4, had its mouth shut by Nico Robin's power as it tried to launch a laser beam. This caused the beam to explode in the clone's mouth and damaged its internal framework. While the unit went berserk, it wasn't enough to shut it down. The only way to defeat a pacifista clone seems to be by breaking the neck, which disconnects the circuits and cleaves it in two. During Sabody, the Strawhats weren't strong enough to take on even one of the pacifista units. However, after the time skip, Luffy alone one-shots one clone while Zoro and Sanji swiftly defeat another with a combined attack. When berserk, a pacifista can fire wildly all around itself, which it did in the aforementioned instance. The level of damage sends the pacifista into a state of panic and locks it into fight mode, causing it to attack aimlessly to eliminate any possible threat. The Mark III. The Mark III pacifista model experiences a huge upgrade with it being able to weaponize a Yaruki-man type resin, which is basically what is used by Rayleigh to coat ships. And, as we've already seen, coated ships headed for Fishman Island can withstand incredible levels of water pressure. For Mark III, a hole in the unit's palm launches the resin in battle and uses it as a bubble shield. This can deflect bazookas, and it's probably functional outside Sabaodi's unique geography due to some unexplained technology developed by Vegapunk. How was the pacifista operated with respect to the erasure of Kuma's mind? The sad part about the pacifista's nature is how Kuma's mind wiping has led to him not being able to feel pain. The unit just goes through barrages of inhumane attacks without flinching, takes brutal abuse without any retaliation, and shows zero signs of discomfort even when stabbed with a sword, despite a living, breathing, organic being intercepting those attacks. It had its mind completely washed by the time Marineford rolled in, but prior to that, Kuma had requested Vegapunk to program him to protect the Thousand Sunny in the absence of the Strawhats until any one of the crew members returned. So, for 2 years, Kuma defended the ship and fought off Marines, intercepting attacks and getting more and more battered until Franky returned 2 years following the Paramount War. Up until Sabaody, Kuma had some free will, which is why he let the Strawhats survive in Thriller Bark, and then again in Sabaody, where he strategically sent the members away to places where they could hone their skills. However, he would not have been able to protect the Sunny after the completion of his transformation, as he would lose his free will unless he was programmed to do so. During Egghead, we see Kuma protecting Bonnie against Saturn, despite not being programmed to do so and being a completed cyborg. Not just because of the protective nature as a father, but possibly due to his Buccaneer blood making him special, as stated by Vegapunk himself. This shouldn't have been possible, but it was. By the time Kuma and Bonnie escape with the Giants and the Straw Hats, a smile can be seen on Kuma's face. Chain of command over the control of the pacifistas. Because the pacifistas are mindless weapons of war, they can be controlled by others, namely the creator Vegapunk and the world government. However, a chain of hierarchy exists where certain groups have more authority over the units to command the pacifistas than others. A high-ranking individual can override the command of someone lower ranked in authority. For those who aren't entitled to directly command a pacifista, they can do so by possessing an authority chip, but even then, their commands will have no power over the command of someone who is higher in rank. For example, some members of the CPO possess authority chips, such as Rob Lucci, Stussy, and Kaku. The Admiral Kizaru and the Marines sent to Egghead during the Egghead incident were given authority chips as well, allowing them to issue commands to operate the pacifistas. However, the pacifistas aren't inherently programmed to listen to them, so let's talk about those who are, starting from those lowest in rank up to the one on top. At the bottom, we have Sentomaru, the captain of the Marine Science Unit and a person who has been close to both Kuma as well as Vegapunk. Above him, we have Vegapunk himself, the creator of the pacifista who obviously has the ability to issue commands. Any Vegapunk command, be it from the original Stella body or that from his satellites, are valid. However, Vegapunk created the pacifistas for the world government, and for this reason, cannot allow himself to possess the highest level of authority on them if he wants to keep his head intact. For this reason, he is preceded by the 5 elders in hierarchy whose commands can override Vegapunk's. All 5 of them have the same level of authority over the pacifistas, however, and the command of one cannot override that of the other unless someone higher in the list takes over. On paper, the 5 elders have ultimate authority on the pacifistas. In reality, Vegapunk had secretly programmed Jewelry Bonnie to have that power instead, as she was Kuma's daughter, and considering how far Kuma had gone to protect her, Vegapunk didn't wish for a future where a pacifista who possessed her father's face would hurt or kill Bonnie, with her being powerless. This twist was revealed in Egghead, where Vegapunk revealed it to Bonnie as the pacifista closed in on her. The exposure of this secret intensified Vegapunk's betrayal towards the world government and became one of the several reasons, alongside his broadcast, research into the history of the Void Century, and attempts to analyze poneglyphs that made the world government come for his life. Needless to say, Saint Saturn was livid when Bonnie's command overrode that of his. With that being said, the commands have to be issued in person and cannot be done via transponder snails. If a commander of a pacifista is incapacitated, the unit will still perform accordingly until someone higher in authority changes the order. Can pacifistas speak? Yes, a pacifista can speak, but they barely do so. Prior to the complete erasure of Kuma's free will, his pacifista exchanged a few words with the others, asking them about where they wished to go for a vacation before he sent them flying, or telling Zoro about taking on Luffy's pain and the like. After the erasure, it had only spoken to announce the presence of a pirate with a bounty, as seen in Marineford, very much like a robot who has no thoughts of its own and says what it's been programmed to say. Are pacifistas immortal? If constantly upgraded, the pacifista clones of Kuma can continue to survive as they are 100% inorganic and were never alive in the first place. For the main body, however, it's unlikely for the pacifista to be immortal as it is organic within, despite having an inorganic exterior. As a Buccaneer, Kuma might live much longer than the average human, as proven by the giants having lives way longer than that of humans. And Buccaneers are said to possess the blood of giants, owing to their strength and size. However, the pacifista will cease to operate once Kuma reaches the end of lifeline, as there are no mentions about the cyborg transformation process halting a being's age. The only known immortal, or somewhat immortal beings in the One Piece universe are Emu and the Five Elders. Marvelous verdict! It seems as though Kuma is regaining bits and pieces of his humanity. We know that the Revolutionary Army tried to fix him after he was rescued from the Reverie, following which he went berserk and started to climb the Red Line and operate on his own, but as stated by Vegapunk, it might have had something to do with his Buccaneer heritage. With One Piece airing its final saga and the involvement of the legend of Nika with Luffy's Gear 5 transformation, we're sure to learn more about the race that retained the stories of the Sun God and the anatomical advantages that a member of the Buccaneer tribe can possess. With that, we're sure to get deeper insight into Kuma, as it seems like Oda is cooking with him. With that thought, today's marvelous video comes to an end. What are your thoughts on Bartholomew Kuma, the last of the Buccaneers? We want to hear all about it in the comments. And if there's any other One Piece topics you want us to explore, let us know down there too. We're always looking for video ideas. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now, but thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.